Adrian N. Breitfelder, City Clerk, you are hereby directed to call a special session of the City Council to be held on Monday, June 3rd, 2024 at 5:15 p.m. in the historic Federal Building for the purpose of conducting a work session on city prevention and response to an active aggressor situation.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to a special session of the Dubuque City Council for June 3rd, 2024. As a reminder to viewers and listeners, due to the nature of tonight's meeting topic, public input is not accepted. However, you may contact the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/council-contacts. Attendance for the session is as follows. Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Council members Farber.
Here.
Thank you. Jones.
Here.
Resnick. Here. Roussel.
Here.
Sprank.
Here.
Wethel.
Here.
City Manager Van Milligan.
Here.
And City Attorney Brumwell.
Here.
Thank you. Our work session topic is city prevention and response to an active aggressor situation. I will turn it over to Police Chief Jeremy Jensen.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Jeremy Jensen, Chief of Police. With me tonight, so just kind of have an idea of who we here. We have Mike Size from the school district. Here's one of our partners, Captain Steve Radloff, who is in charge of the community policing and school resource officers. Lieutenant Bruce Deutsch, who is the school resource officer in charge of that. And then Lieutenant Luke Bach, who heads up our training for our active aggressor training. And then at some point, Assistant Chief Joe Meserich will show up here for this too. So we had a little bit of rain here just a little bit ago, so trying to recoup from this a little bit. Kind of give you the history. So 1999, big date for law enforcement in active aggressor. This was the Columbine High School shooting. This changed how we responded to everything. In 1999, what would happen is you had an active shooter or active aggressor. Police would contain the person, and that's what happened in Columbine, and wait for a tactical unit or a SWAT team. Found out that history and statistics show that people get killed during that time and get hurt. And so we changed our tactics. So we came out with active aggressor training. Here in Dubuque, we jumped right on it. We ordered some equipment, which included the rifles and the patrol cars to give us more accurate and to give us some distance, but also our training was the big part of that. So the first version of this, and it's, what I want to iterate to you all tonight is that this is constantly evolving. We are constantly looking at it. We're constantly changing our tactics and our procedures. The first iteration of this had 4 officers that get together. The officers would, before anybody would go in, it would be 4 officers. And they do a formation and go in. Then, once the scene was secured, they would set up with what was called a rescue team, which then officers would go in and be the rescue team to get the injured or whatever out of the building. But this was once the scene was secured and the threat was taken care of. But we did start this, so that's the first iteration. Every officer is trained in this. We go over this. It started with that. Obviously, this started with schools on that, but it can be anywhere. Anywhere there's more than multiple victims and things can happen with that way. Also, I talked about us morphing and us adapting. Offenders have adapted over the years, so we're constantly trying to change some of that. So what areas of focus we'll talk about tonight, because I really want to spend a lot of time so you all can ask questions to kind of give you the background, but prevention and preparation or response in our recovery. Now, in prevention and preparation, as you can see here, community education is key. This is the civilian response to an active aggressor presentations that we do. Start out with schools, like I said, is workplaces, places of worship. You can see on the bottom, we've done 248 of these presentations since 2014 on this topic. This is in the community. So this is, obviously and when things happen, we get a lot more of them. And then they'll trail off and something will happen and we'll do more of those. What we teach is the run, hide, fight, and as a response and tactic. There's other versions. ALICE, you may have heard of that, the acronym. I can't tell you what that stands for right now, but it's another acronym to remember more letters, what they stand for. Run, hide, fight. We teach people, run if you can get away, get away. Hide if you can, hide, block doors, lock doors, do things like that. We know that, aggressors in this generally look for a path of least resistance, so. And the last part of that is fight. Fight back with whatever you have. It's not necessarily arming people as much as fighting back with what you have. And you'll see standard things like fire extinguishers, things like that, as being whatever's handy to fight back with. The biggest thing that we see is if you see something, say something. We're getting a lot better with this. Back when Columbine happened, there was a lot of things that after the fact, people were like, oh, he did this, they did that, they did, Now we're seeing a lot more. Social media, things get posted. I can tell you from the Dubuque Police Department perspective, if we hear about it, we act upon it. We don't wait to see how it plays out, or even if it's, hey, somebody said this at school today, we respond to that. Part of having our SROs in the schools, they can get on it right now. There's numerous incidents where we've got it after school hours, we jump on it, and by the time school starts the next morning, we have it resolved. Luckily, most of them are idle threats. Somebody makes a threat, but we take it still serious. It's still a criminal act to do so. 30 years ago, somebody said, I'm going to go shoot up the school tomorrow. Everybody would have laughed and said, yeah, whatever, that's just you. Now it's like, no, that's serious, and you will be charged with that. So we'd rather run down the idle threats. We'd rather run down just somebody heard something in the hall or something like that rather than have something happen. And we've been, again, particularly Lieutenant Deutsch can tell you that we run that stuff down a lot. Not that we have a lot of threats, but when it happens, we run it down, and we run it down quick. The one thing that you can see here on the bullet point, it says explain actions of local first responders. I will say there's no win in any of this. It is a lose situation. As far as police and law enforcement responding, fire responding, everybody's coming to this. They're going to come from all over. It is going to be chaos, and it's going to be high stress for everybody, including the first responders. Because the last thing what's going to happen is we're going into these situations. You don't know what you're going to encounter or where you're going to encounter it at. You're seeing some things where actually the encounter happens in the parking lot because somebody's trying to leave and somebody's going in. So you see that. I also want to point out that, as this kind of slide says that, we want the public to be aware, and that's where this really comes from. And again, I keep going back to, if you see something, say something, because that is the biggest thing, is somebody reporting. And we do. We have school-age children that report this stuff. But we really, really need it in a timely fashion, not 3 days later, but as they hear it and as they do that. So threat response and assessment. So the school district, and using with us and using our partners on the federal level, developed a response protocol for investigating and assessing threats. So we use this when we do have threats, depending on where they're at. We had one with some bomb threats, and we actually used the FBI to track that down because it was done via internet, and it was done using cryptocurrency. So, pay $50 on cryptocurrency, and you can make a threat. If it doesn't work, we had to do a second one for free. No, but it's something similar to that. We actually had that happen that way. We're really using our resources. Again, this is not just Dubuque, it's not Iowa, it can happen anywhere, and so the federal agencies have really taken a lead in that. The prevention and preparation, as you can see, is a collaborative effort. None of this is just the Dubuque Police Department coming up with something. It requires our partners, requires collaboration, and a lot of communication. And that's how we start to mitigate it or do the prevention side of that. As far as training, so our police training, I said every new officer is trained during and after the police academy. We do it, and the police academy does it. We do in-service training, and then rescue task force training. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. The supervisor training, we started doing this as how to manage these situations. Like I said, it's going to be chaos. It's going to be big, but it's really using the emergency management system, using the NIMS system, and that's how you set it up. It's like any other, like a major weather event. It's going to be set up the same way. We also train with the surrounding agencies. The sheriff's office, Asbury PD, they come in and they train with us. Again, like I said, everybody's coming to this. And it could be anybody responding. Quite honestly, with some of our West schools, Asbury PD could be the first one there, just because of their proximity to that. The Rescue Task Force training, this is something that started in a collaboration with then Fire Chief Brown. Brought up this idea of, they're the experts in the medical side. The way it was set up before that, when I talked about the first iterations, was police is going in and doing basic triage. But the concept of, fire's here to save lives too. And they operate in an inherent danger environment. So looking at a rescue task force that involves firefighters to be able to set up before the scene is safe and start rendering aid. They can talk a lot about, the critical minutes that it is to render aid on that. Also another part of that, because we had seen things like improvised explosive devices, things that start fires, being able to fight a fire at the same time to prevent lives, because people are in lockdown. They don't know maybe that something else is burning, so being able to do that. So we did a lot of training kind of ahead of the game. Now I think it's a fairly common practice to have medical personnel involved in this. But I will tell you, several years ago, now probably more than that now, 10 years ago, we were in Anniston, Alabama, which is this Center for Domestic Preparedness, and we introduced this concept to some firefighters that said, hey, why don't you come join us? Again, it wasn't widely accepted to be able to do this as it was going on, but we were able to kind of introduce that, and they said, this is actually a really good idea. It's a force multiplier, so we were able to bring that to them. School training. We do school training each year with the school staff. Again, bring this up, it's a topic. Nobody likes to talk about it. It's traumatic. There's no other way to say it. But we also help with the drills that they do as part of their protocol. This is the equipment I talked about that we added. One I will also add is that we also have tourniquets in the same go bag. So we can apply, if somebody's bleeding severely from arm or leg, we can apply a tourniquet with that. But these are things to make the officers safer. This went against protocol. I mean, this is different officers putting themselves straight into it. We were taught when I first got in law enforcement that the officer is the first person you protect, and then you work down from that. But this changed that. The response. So this is where it started to change. Like I said, it used to be wait for 4 officers to get there, set up your formation, and you go in. What changed is that takes too much time. This takes too much time, particularly when seconds count. So officers are now trained to go in. As soon as you get there, first officer goes in. Second one gets there, they go in. This is how we're trained to try to mitigate the threat. It doesn't mean kill, doesn't mean shoot, it doesn't mean that. And that's just mitigate the threat or isolate the threat so nobody else is getting injured. That's the whole goal of the response, is that nobody else is getting hurt during this. Our trainers attend the regional training events. Again, we're looking at best practices, tactics, just trying to find a better way to, can we do things more effective, more efficiently, and as offenders morph, that we're staying ahead of that game. The rapid mobilization of the Rescue Task Force. This is, like I talked about just a second ago, this is critical. Fire's actually bought into this immensely. Dubuque Fire has. They got ballistic vests. They have helmets. They're able to come in and essentially do triage and set that up. And lack of a better term, in combat zone. I mean, that's how they're setting up to do this. And hopefully we never have to use this. We know that will help save lives. We know that. And then we're working also with the school district leadership, emergency management professionals, and we'll do this with the NIMS system and being able to set that up as a response. Now the recovery. So we have a plan. Let me say this. We will not tell you what the plan is as part of this. It's protected by code for the school district. Let me put that in there. But they have a plan. We will do this. Obviously, everybody's going, why won't you tell us what this is? As I said, offenders morph. We don't want them to set up a secondary. We've seen this with some mass things in the United States, and we don't want people to set up on that as we do that. So we don't tell what that is. But I can assure you we have a plan on this. And now I'm going to let You're up.
Katie Wethel. I live at 560 Fenland Place in Dubuque, Iowa, and I have the privilege of serving as the Ward 4 representative. In Ward 4, I represent 4 elementary schools and 1 middle school. Families in our city have an expectation of our community, and that's to nurture, love, and keep safe our most precious, our kids. I spoke with you in this chamber in January after the tragic events in Perry, Iowa, in which Principal Dan Marburger attempted to de-escalate an act of violence by a child in his school. He bravely and selflessly gave his life so that his staff and students could escape to safety. Too often these tragedies happen. People feel called to act, but when time passes, communities become complacent. I will not let that happen in our city. As City Council, we do not have control over state and federal gun safety legislation, and we have no say in allocation and distribution of state and county funding for those who desperately need brain health care. I challenge us, though, not to focus on those things we cannot change. I want us to lead. Research suggests that there are actions communities themselves can take to prevent acts of violence like those that occurred in Perry. Teaching our community about signs of violence and warning signs that would be created. Creating clear reporting mechanisms for the community when they have a concern. Ensuring that resources are available to law enforcement to conduct behavior threat assessments. Build resiliency in our children and create communities of connectedness. Soon after my request for action to you, Mary Jo Jean-Francois, Vice President of Impact at the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque, contacted me to ask how we might come together as mothers of school-aged children in a desire to do our part. She's here tonight, and I do want to tell you that her work has been exceptional in already collaborating with me, and I look forward to the future of it, so I'm going to let her introduce.
Thank you, Councilwoman Wethel. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, Mr. City Manager, and Chief Jensen, first I want to start out by thanking you once again, not only for your support of the Community Foundation, but most importantly, your unending commitment to finding solutions to some of the most challenging and, in this case, most heart-wrenching issues that our community faces. As the City Councilwoman said, my name is Mary Jo Jean-Francois, and I am the Vice President of Impact at the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque. The Community Foundation believes that schools are the cornerstones in our community, where children should feel free and safe from all forms of violence. The administrations of our school districts, teachers, and staff, in partnership with law enforcement, do everything in their power to keep our kids safe each and every day. But imagine how much impact we could have if we, as a community, came together to do our part as well. What would that look like, and what would it take? I'd like to read you something that Dr. Christina Whalen, who's a researcher and psychologist for Rethink Ed, wrote. Quote, "While school violence is not always preventable, taking proactive steps to minimize risk factors and build resilience and connectedness may save lives. While it may seem like a reasonable response to increase security with officers, locks, cameras, metal detectors, etc., research indicates that these do not improve feelings of safety in students. Building social, emotional, and mental wellness skills and actively engaging students in building a safe, supportive, and productive environment is a key to unlocking a safer future for our schools," end quote. As Councilwoman Wethel said, we cannot take on every issue and every intervention that it takes to keep our kids safe. And so we leave what we can to the experts like our law enforcement partners. But in our role as conveners and collaborators at the Community Foundation, we have the privilege of listening to the community and working with partners and stakeholders to identify opportunities to make our schools even safer for students. This summer, we plan to host facilitated community conversations to learn and understand how we can lift this issue up. We'll start by inviting teachers on July 9th at our Rural Teachers Summit to our first conversation. After that, we will invite parents and community members, and perhaps most importantly, students, to join us in conversations. As we gather information, we'll simultaneously be looking at systems and models in other communities to see what we can replicate. Then this fall, we'll create a committee that will identify actionable items based on what we've learned that we can invite all community members to engage in. As you'll see on the slide here, our focus will be on prevention, preparedness, partnership, and promotion. It will build on other Community Foundation initiatives that we have already started around school attendance, brain health, and supporting teachers and administrators. 3 things which research shows decreases school violence and decreases violent actions by students themselves. Although we don't know yet exactly what the activities will be, we know that the ultimate goal is that every child comes to school feeling safe and secure enough to learn and comes home each and every day to their families. We look forward to this work, and we hope that you'll join us along the way. Thank you.
So I ask you, my council colleagues, will you join me? This August, our goal-setting process, I want us to consider what you've heard tonight. Specifically, we have a say in the funding and support for continued efforts in this work. In our current priority of police department full staffing, I ask for consideration of focus on community policing and school resource officers. Let us be an example in creating programming in our city that will support families and educators, collaborate with community partners, and provide support for children and families that need it. We owe it to our children, our educators, and Dan Marberger to commit to the work and ensure everyone can feel safe in school. Thank you.
So a little bit about our school resource officer program, then have Mike Size come up and say a few words about our partnership. We, as I've said before you, we operate our resource officers a lot different than everybody else. A lot of places, I shouldn't say everybody else, a lot of places. They're social workers, they're more involved. We currently have 6 that are assigned. 5 right now, we had one just leave, but 6 is the number we have. The partnership is in these, and Lieutenant Deutsch can attest to this, that they are in constant communication with the school, constant. All hours of the day, after hours, every issue, that kind of thing. It is a very, very strong collaborative effort to do school safety and to do the best we can to make our kids safe in the school district, or in the schools in themselves. So I'm going to have Mike come up and just say a few words.
Good evening, Mayor Kavanaugh, City Council members, City Manager Van Milligan. My name is Mike Size. I'm the Chief Communication Officer for the Dubuque Community School District, and I have the great pleasure to work with the group behind us in our partnership with the Dubuque Police Department and our School Resource Officer Program. I really just wanted to take a moment to reiterate from the district's perspective how invaluable the partnership is that we have with the Dubuque Police Department and with the School Resource Officer Program. As Chief Jensen said, we really see our program as a model for how School Resource Officer programs should work. When we speak with our colleagues from other school districts around the state, we are often the envy of those conversations because of the collaboration and communication we have. And I think when it goes back to the success and the power of the work that we do together, it's everything you've heard tonight. It's about relationships and partnership. And we are so fortunate in Dubuque to have that consistent ongoing partnership. We operate in lockstep. As a school district, we are not emergency management professionals. But all of our protocols are built with our partnership with the police department, with our emergency management professionals, with the resources that they have at their disposal. And then how do we put our educator lens on that? But school safety is something that we are continually working on and conscious of. It's at the top of our priorities. And as Chief Jensen said, we can look at those watershed moments. It was Columbine, it was Sandy Hook, it was Parkland. And every one of those instances brought with it modification of safety protocols, additional best practices that we learn and how we implement those in our district and across our community. And I really just wanted to impress upon you the value that we find in our school resource officer program, the ongoing work that happens. You know, when Chief Jensen references training of officers, Dubuque police officers train active response protocols in our school buildings. So we have students during the day, but at night we don't, and we have regular instances on an ongoing basis where officers actually do their active response training in school buildings. And I think that's just one example of many examples that I could give you of the great partnership we have. So on behalf of the Dubuque Community School District, I thank you for your commitment. I thank our police department partners for that commitment, because our goal is always to make sure that students come and learn in a safe environment all the time. And we believe that we're able to do that through many layers of safety and through these great partnerships. So thank you for your time tonight.
And with that, I'll open it for any questions.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chief and Mary Jo and Mike and Councilwoman Wethel. And I'll welcome you back, Katie, if you like. I might as well be a part of this discussion up here. That way we can have some, and you can answer any questions from up here easily too. I'll kick us off. We've got plenty of time for discussion on this. We don't have anything else until our 6:30 meeting. I'm right about that, right? We don't have anything else until our 6:30 meeting? Okay, good. So we've got plenty of time for discussion. You know, every time we talk about this particular topic, there's just such a rush of emotions that occur. And you think about, you know, I used to, when I was a college professor, I used to teach on this topic. I actually spent an entire lesson on it. And the premise of the lesson was teaching social workers how to think in systems to be able to not let this happen anymore. So to challenge my students to think like what Councilwoman Wethel and Mary Jo and all of you here have just challenged us to do, to think about how do we insert ourselves into the situation and into the equation so this doesn't happen anymore. Because when we were growing up, this didn't happen. And I have to remind students of that because they didn't recognize that. For their entire life, from the time that I taught, for the decade that I did, they never knew a time when this didn't occur. I find that absolutely tragic and frankly quite ridiculous that we live in a society where we don't work to stop this more actively. And the fact that we live in a community where we are actively talking about how do we keep this from happening in the future is, it's so much about who we are. I want to point out, we're doing a good job already. We have successfully worked together to make sure this doesn't happen in our community. And I love that we are now talking about how do we continue to do even better. And Mike, I want to particularly thank you for being here as a representative of the school district. You're run by a different governing body. You know, we don't control the schools in this town. The school board is the group that works to work with what the direction of the school is going to be. But you work directly with us. You work with our police department. You work with us as a city council and with all city staff. I see the fire chief sitting behind you, for example. You know, we have a lot of ways that we can access these partnerships to make sure that we do what we need to do here. And I was writing down, I didn't catch all of it, but Mary Jo, when you were reading, you had the quote, and I caught a couple of things. Building resilience, increasing connectedness, and minimizing the risk through those things. Building social emotional resources, not only for students, but for the families they live with, for the teachers that are there working with them, for all of us as community members. These are absolutely fantastic steps to start to work through. And then just on the piece that you spoke to, Chief, you know, this is the second time you presented to us here in the last couple of years on this. And I sincerely appreciate that you are leading a department and working in partnership with other departments throughout the city to make sure that you're ready if something occurs. And I have the full faith and trust that you are ready when something occurs. So thank you very much for doing that work and for doing the preventative work on the front end through the school resource officer program. I see, the school resource officers represented, and I sincerely appreciate that we have all of those resources here in the community. So with that, I'll stop, and I have a couple of questions as we think about, some of the challenges that Councilmember Wethel has made for us as a council, but then also the ways we can look at this together. But I'll open it up to my council colleagues first, and then we can talk more. Yeah, Mr. Resnick.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief, and all the first responders. So such a challenging time that we live in. And I'm going to ask you about a couple things that you kind of alluded to, but I wanted to get some specifics. You mentioned that there is a plan, and sometimes when I see these unfortunate things happen in other communities, they say, well, the first responders acted according to their plan, didn't do very well. And I'm scratching my head thinking, who knew about this plan and who approved it? Did they have a mayor and city council, or how was that done? For you, knowing the plan is great. And I know that there's good reasons. But there may be good reasons also to maybe let the city manager know, and maybe he knows these things too, and maybe let the mayor know. I don't want to put him in any danger, with his knowledge. But do you feel that there is any reason to let somebody know who supports the citizen what the plan is, and that it sounds like, yeah, this is something our community will be excited about, or anything like that? Yours.
That was directly related to reunification, and Mike can actually talk about that, but it actually is in code. They don't release that information that is run. The reunification is run by the school district, and so that's why it's not released. It is not legal for us to release that. So
I would just add to that, as the chief said, that it is the one document in school world that is confidential for obvious reasons. But our school board does actually review and approve our safety crisis management plan on an annual basis. We work on an annual basis with our law enforcement partners, with emergency management personnel to review those plans based on best practices. And then we do have an annual review of that with our school board that they take action to approve that plan on an annual basis. So again, while it's not this governing body, just good to know that the school board does review and take action on those. In instances when we have significant changes, we have in the past had closed session meetings where we can update the school board on those, again, according to Iowa code, as another step in that process, but they do take annual action on that plan.
Fantastic. Well, that's good to know that the school board is always on top of that and takes action. Another one, question that's on the topic and yet kind of off topic, is you say sometimes you don't wait to see, you get a call and you don't wait to, see if this is right. You just go because seconds matter. And so many times lately, it's the thing, I guess, people get swatted, they say, sure. And it's hard on your folks, and it's hard on the people. What can be done for these emergency situations that have to happen now, and yet people are using this as some kind of game of some kind that's a deadly game.
Yeah.
So what's your policy on that type of thing to try and not allow that?
Well, there's not a good answer to that because you get a call, right? And this is what happens. So our checks and balances, the dispatcher taking the call, you're starting to see things. Does this feel right? Does this go right? Officers responding or fire responding. And what do they see? Are they starting to see this doesn't add up? This doesn't sound right. Unfortunately, it is so easy with the internet right now, in the cyber world, to be able to do this. And you can do it from anywhere in the world. You can do a swatting event, and that's unfortunate. The other unfortunate part of that is, you do a swatting event, particularly outside the United States, and do it here. There's no ramification for it. In the United States now, we have the federal side, the FBI and things are looking at that. If something happens, the incident we had with bomb threats, the cyber thing, that was Oregon or Washington? Oregon is where that actually originated from, even though it was a local person using a system in Oregon. So using the FBI to start across the state lines. We don't obviously have jurisdiction outside the city limits of Dubuque, so we have to use our partnerships. But yeah, there's not a good answer to it. You see bad things happen, to your point, across the country where it's like this happened and officers respond because that's what we do, you know. But again, trying to use all our resources. Part of it is, you know, again, our officers were there, like I said, talk about chaos and being and stress that, be using even our mindfulness training that I've talked to you about to get our officers to calm, start to look at things. Okay, what's going on? Is this really what it is? And we've had some of those incidents where that has happened, and we were able to resolve them without having any like major response type thing.
Great. And finally, you know, a lot of people have suggestions on how to do it better or best. One suggestion is, and there's been some action on this, is that school personnel be armed. Do you work with that, or do you recommend that, or you won't work with that? What's the policy on
I would defer to whatever the school district is doing on that and what their governing side of that is. You know, I will say this, as we respond to things there's armed, we're the ones responding with the guns. We respond to a situation where there's other people armed, part of the chaos. You know, there's not a lot of time. People have to react, and it can add to the chaos if somebody doesn't immediately respond to us and they're trying to do good. You know, so there's some things you see that. So it's really not into the gun debate. It's really about what the school district decides is best for them, and then we'll work with them on whatever I know there's, you know.
I get what you're saying,
Yeah.
but of course, my opinion is that our staff, you and your staff, are in danger with people with, like you say, more firearms into the situation. And anyway, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if we'd ever have a talk about that, what we would do if we were asking our employees to walk in there in this situation where there's school staff with firearms, and we're sending our good folks in there, and to me, it's more dangerous, but I don't know the science on this, just a feeling, which can be wrong. But anyway, I do want to say that I'm concerned, and I'm glad you're doing such a great job here for us in Dubuque and in the schools. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
if you don't mind, I'd like to add something to that. So I have read in the paper that the school district has decided that they're not going to arm their teachers in the Dubuque Community School District. I personally think that's a really good decision, and one of the things I reflect on was the last time that police was here reporting on police-involved shootings, and Assistant Chief Joe Messerich reported about a study from the Dallas, Texas Police Department from 2018, and they said that officers struck their targets 35% of the time in the review of over 134 police shootings. So if a highly trained police officer who unfortunately gets into these not just shooting situations quite frequently, but very high stress situations, so they have, I would suggest, a greater capability than the rest of us to deal with those high stress situations. When they shoot, that they hit their target only 35% of the time, I would be very fearful of a very minimally trained school teacher pulling out a gun and starting to shoot it with a whole bunch of people around. And who knows what percent they're going to hit their targets, and who knows what else they are going to hit.
Yeah, Ms. Russell.
Thank you. One of the things that you mentioned in your presentation that I'm sure is one of the big challenges is the see something, say something. And I noticed, I heard you say that sometimes you get tips from students. I wondered, how are our children educated so that they're comfortable coming forward? Is that part of the school resource officers' relationship building? Is that where you hope to gain from that? Or how do students feel confident that they're doing the right thing?
Well, and yeah, part of it's a relationship building. Part of it's what the school district does with their students, you know, in making it so it's a safe, comfortable environment. And so multi-layers, multi-different entities coming together, and then they have this conversation to say, hey, you know, it's okay. It's okay to say something. You're not going to get in trouble for saying something. You know, you think back 40 years ago, you know, people would have scoffed it and laughed at it or said, oh, yeah, whatever, you know, that kind of thing. And now we've done, I shouldn't say we've done, people have gotten a lot better about it. We're getting a lot more. And it generally will come out like, hey, this might be nothing, but, you know, my daughter heard this today. Okay, we'll act upon that. And so I don't think anybody's feeling the ramifications of reporting anything, you know? So there's not anything where the blowback on it. This is common. This is what happens. If you say it, you should expect that somebody's going to say that you said that. If you say, I'm going to go shoot up a school tomorrow, expect somebody's going to tell on you. And I want people to understand that. You know, somebody will tell on you, and so don't do it, you know?
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Sprank.
So, thank you, Chief, and of course, your staff for all you've been doing. Kind of a follow-up to that question is, so what are the legal ramifications to the parents of a child that's a minor that does say something and they get turned in?
That gets a little bit more complicated. So the child, you know, if the parent's complicit in that would be that part of that. You know, you saw some things, and we haven't had this, knock on wood, and thank goodness, in this area, but, you know, you just saw recently in Michigan where parents were charged for supplying a weapon, right, and being complicit. I mean, we'll look at every situation on that, but generally, for the most part, and I guess Lieutenant Deutsch can back me up on this or say if parents are generally pretty cooperative when we run into this. Yeah. I'll let him talk about it just a little bit more.
Hello, everyone. Bruce Deutsch, and Supervising SRO Lieutenant. As for reporting, there's a program called Iowa Safe and Sound, just to follow up with yours. It's an anonymous reporting system that the state started about a year ago. We've used it once this year, successfully, that students or whoever can make a report anonymously on that app, and then it's forwarded to us, to our dispatch center, and then it's given to us to work off of that. As for parents' involvement, most parents are really, really cooperative. Part of our process when we do get like a threat to the school and we investigate a student for a threat, we work hand in hand with juvenile court services. That juvenile court service requires that they allow us to come do a home search to allow juvenile court to do that, and we assist with that, and then we go in and we look for any red flag items like guns, manifestos, things like this that the parents might not know, and the parents are generally really cooperative and allow us to do that. And if they do resist that a little bit, then there's some consequences through juvenile court services that we can't really do, but they can do. So again, it's just that partnership we have with them that it works pretty well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ms. Wethel.
Well, thanks for letting me get up with you. I have so much respect for all that you do. Thank you so much. And I've been diving into things I never really knew I would dive into. So I'm a nurse practitioner. I work in healthcare, but I'm a mom, and now I'm a city council member. And so those things overlap a little bit. I will say in the work that I have been involved with the Community Foundation thus far, I am so impressed with where we are. I am so grateful for where we are, and the collaboration with the school district is exceptional. So thank you so much. The questions I have, Chief, with the new legislation, will we need to increase our presence in the school resource officers in the Dubuque Community School District based on the new legislation?
Not based on the new legislation, but that would be perfect if we could do that. Obviously, our staffing levels, I mean, you get more school resource officers, you got officers working the street, and so that's one of those things we'll have to work through. We do meet, we have met, we met this morning on this very topic, actually, with the school district, and just trying to, how we can allocate the resource, the new legislation, obviously, for having a SRO Full-time, again, what does that mean in the high school levels? We're trying to sort through that. What does that actually mean? We like our model. We believe our model works really well. With the legislation, we believe did not take that into account, that we have a really good model, that it was set up for people who don't have a model. But if we have to tweak within that, that's one thing we're going to be looking at here, and to see where our resources need to be allocated and what we can best do for that.
And you mentioned this. What is the best way to report the "my daughter heard this today" scenario? And the Iowa Safe and Sound, I'll be honest, I'm a parent and I didn't know about it until I read about it. And then I went online and you can download an app, but I'm not sure how many people really download an app for Iowa Safe and Sound.
Right.
And so I've been places at different schools where they had a sheet on the inside of the door of a bathroom stall. And there's QR codes for the kids about if you are having struggles with your brain health, these are your options. This QR code, they can click on it, they can access it, they can know where to go. And the same thing goes for possibly like a reporting line. So in the schools themselves, I saw this model at a show choir competition. I can't remember where the high school was, but it was on the inside of a door of a bathroom stall. And I thought, this is a safe space where a kid can take a picture of it and they can act on it, which I thought was so brilliant. But for parents, what in Dubuque, in our city, if my daughter comes home and says, I heard something, I don't know what to do, Mom, what do I do?
Yeah, our emergency dispatch center is answered 24/7. That's the best way.
Okay.
But again, some people are not comfortable with that, and some people feel, I don't want to bother them with this. Again, so there's other avenues. Prefer that they do something. If they do it through the app, it's more real time. They call the dispatch center, whether it be 911 or the non-emergency number. It's more immediate response. If you go through our web QA or our reporting system to the internet, it won't get looked at till the next day. So that's not something we want to have happen. We don't have that, but we do have a dispatch center. So that'll get somebody rolling on it. We'll start to look at it and what we need to do for the resources and we'll mobilize that right away. So,
thank you.
Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Jones.
Let me just take the chief's comment a step farther. Having come from that background of emergency services, I've always told people, if you even think for a second, should I call 911? The answer was yes, before you ask the question. If it even crosses your mind, because all of us in emergency response would rather respond to 10 calls that we're not needed than to miss one where we desperately are.
And that's absolutely true.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Ms. Farber, did you have anything?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mary Jo, and you had talked about your very proactive, forthcoming community dialogue to get more conveners and more collaborators and more education on the concerns for this conversation. You mentioned teachers, parents, community members, and some students. And I was just thinking perhaps to add to that list maybe the local universities and the local seminaries, because they go through the same issues. They have the social, emotional, mental wellness issues on campus, and they have all of the concerns for the public safety as we have been talking about tonight. And I think that it's a multi-pronged problem to solve. And if all of these entities were perhaps invited to the conversation, that there might be some very wonderful opportunities to have further conversation and maybe some interesting actions. Have you thought about that?
I had not thought about that, but I certainly will. I think it's a great idea, and we can definitely invite our partners in the local universities to have that conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Again,
and thank you, Ms.
Ms. Farber, it's Chief Jensen. We do partner with the universities and have worked with the seminaries on doing these same talks that we talked about, of those 248 that we've done, and doing drills.
And also, I know that you do talk to the faith-based organizations, because I've been part and parcel to those conversations as well. And I think that those of us that have been in that situation are greatly appreciative, as well as to the conversations and the presentations that you guys have made for the training and for what we can do for prevention. So I thank you, and great presentation by everybody. And it's just really such an important public safety issues. Thank you for sharing.
Mike, go ahead. Yeah, please.
Just a follow-up in terms of student reporting, and again, I can only speak for the Dubuque Community School District and not for what other systems do, but important to know that reporting is something that is worked into all of our student training. We talk about see something, say something, and this goes back to the work that really happens. You know, we often talk about a situation and talk about the response to a specific instance, but what we don't always start with is that safety really begins with prevention, and how do we build those relationships. And so for us, there are multiple layers of ways to report. The first is always tell a trusted adult, and we have a system in place so that when a trusted adult is told something, that information siphons back. As Chief Jensen said, of course, in the out of school hours, 911 is the emergency management piece there, but that happens in a multitude of ways across our district. It happens through our bullying and harassment reporting forum. It happens through telling a trusted adult. It comes in, and I would say anecdotally, we have certainly seen an increase in students willing to report and share information because we've built a culture of that, because of intentional specific work that's been designed to build that culture of trust. And that's where we really see that benefit happen as that reporting comes to be.
Thanks for that, Mike. Did you have something else, Michelle?
I just wanted to add one additional thing. Mary Jo had mentioned, I didn't mention the QR code. So on the slide of the Community Foundation, there's a QR code. And that's been created because as we are going to cultivate community conversations, we're going to try and hone in on individual groups of what role they are in the community and where their care level is. Are they a parent or grandparent? Are they an educator? And are they just an ally in the community? So if you scan the QR code, you will have the ability to then, it will populate to a form in which you can place your name, and we will contact you as the community conversations move forward. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So with a little bit of the time we have, I'd like to get into the weeds just a little bit further. You know, as a city council, we kind of, when you think big in the 30,000-foot view that we take as a body, really a lot of the things that we can do to help come down to resources, policy changes, and to some extent, changes in practice, how we go about the business of city government. That's the city manager's job and the director's job within each department, but it is something that can be a discussion point for city council and can be a part of goal setting and all these different things. So with that said, I'm curious, you know, back to Ms. Wethel's, I would say challenge to us and to the community of how do we move this forward as we think about this as a city council, and you think about resources, policy change, or the changes in how we are going about our business to do the work we want to do here. What are some of the ways in which we might best focus at this point?
I think what we got to be careful is not getting so short-sighted that it's just schools. You know, that's 7.5 hours of the day. There's things that happen outside of that. The social emotional intelligence that we've talked about, it's been mentioned several times here tonight, it's very, very important. You know, teaching people how to deal, not react to violence, but not to get to that point. You know, so that the first, you know, answer to anything is to do violence. I will point out, even when you're talking active aggressor, because, you know, it's not just guns, it's knives, it can be anything that does these things. So, you know, it's really about the violent side of that, and getting to the point where violence isn't the first answer every time I'm affronted or worried about something, or, you know, just that's not the answer to it. That takes a lot. That's not a police department thing. That's not a school district thing. That's, I think, what we're talking here tonight. That is a whole community to be able to develop into the social emotional intelligence side of that. Again, kids are our most valuable resource. We know that, but this stuff happens everywhere, and it happens outside of the school. It happens in, you know, earlier this year we had the big fights happening in parks. violence happening with that, and that was young. That's 12 to 14-year-olds doing that, and that's the age groups that, that are resorting to violence in this, and that's where we really want to, focus our prevention side on that. Yeah, can we do more with more school resource officers in the school? Possibly, but we do a lot with what we have, and they do a lot to, actually, I think the statistics would show that, we do a lot to prevent charging, getting the stigma of that, actually to prevent it and get ahead of that game too. So it doesn't get to that point where we have a major felony charge because things build.
It's a good starting point, Chief. I think, what I heard you say is that the social emotional training is a community-wide issue. We all need to be working on it. And honestly, from the presentation that we received tonight from the Community Foundation and the work that's going to be done going forward, that's a great conversation to be able to start that process there and work with that. I shouldn't say start that process because we're already doing it. The school district's already doing it. We're doing it as staff here as a city, learning more about social emotional training and those types of things to really help us to be able to deal with those things and help you all to deal with it. Okay, so that's good. The question of more SROs, this is one, I think, one of the things that I think is always a balancing act is it's really easy to say, how about we spend more money and put more people there? And sometimes that's not actually the answer. Sometimes that can complicate things even further. And I guess what I would say to us as we think about that is let's think carefully about that as a solution, because I think it's an easy one to point to say, absolutely, we can ease the burden by just putting more people there. But it can also, especially with police officers in schools, we have to recognize what that looks like to everybody. It is a good thing. The way we do it is a good thing. But it can cause challenges, I think, from a community standpoint if we just start increasing the number of police officers that we put in specific places. You all as a department work really, really hard to make it not look like you're just showing up in large numbers for things all the time. You're doing it in a way that you're a part of the community. And I think it would be really important that we make sure that the SRO program stays that way. It's still a part of the fabric of the school district. It's not just, we're gonna put more police officers in schools. There's the answer, boom, we're done. Because that's not the answer. In my mind, at least, I think we need to think carefully about how that really looks and what we're going to do with it. So as we have that discussion about where to put the resources going forward, I want to make sure we think about that carefully in the discussions ahead.
And that's, like I said, there's 7.5 hours in the school. There's the remainder of the day that we can do a lot of trust building and contacts and that in low stress environments. The ideal perfect world is where we are having those interactions and we're not, because we're responding to something, and that's the first interaction we have, to have that ahead of time and to be a part of that. And that's, and I agree with you that more officers in the school, you could put one in every school, but unintended side effect that you will see more reports. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what will come out of that.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and it might be part of the solution. I mean, it very well might be, but we need to be careful about how we think about it, I think. So that's kind of the resource piece of it, is thinking about if we're gonna talk about this in terms of financial resources or people resources, how we might do that. I also want us to think about, are there policy changes that we could pursue that would be helpful in this? And I don't have a really good answer for that right off the top of my head right now. I think it's a part of this discussion that should continue. I hope it's something that, as the community has these discussions, the Community Foundation programming that's going to go on this summer, and as the school district continues to look at this issue, I think it would be helpful to know, are there ways in which we could look at policy that is citywide that could be helpful? And then, of course, there's the practice piece of it, how we do this. We talked a lot about that tonight, how you do this as a police department, how the school district does this, how we do this with other community organizations. So, I'm saying all this out loud, so I hope that it's part of the discussion as we look in the summer and go forward as a community. If we're going to talk about this, I want to think about what can each of us do. There's something that's there for the school district to do and for the school board to do. There's something that we can look at. There's something that we need to push the legislature to do more effectively. We can be a part of that as well. And if there are ways we need to change how we are behaving in these situations or what we're doing to really work towards preventative work, those are the things that I think we can do. So, I really appreciate this conversation tonight. And this is, we're doing something here, and we're moving this conversation forward, and I really appreciate that everybody's here to have it. And thank you specifically to Councilwoman Wethel for your work on this in particular. I know it's very personal for you, so I very much appreciate that you're bringing it to us and challenging us in this way. All right. Well, that was all for that discussion. We have no further business in this work session, so we will be adjourned until 6:30.